I'm a massive fan of fuzz faces. Since playing guitar and especially being a big fan of this guy, Jimi Hendrix, you know, this has fast become my favorite pedal. I love nothing more than cranking this up, getting that full-blown wooliness, that massive wall of sound, and then just being able to tweak my volume, you know, on a good fuzz face, get that beautiful cleanup and those crystal clear, you know, sparkly tones, especially through a single coil Strat. So have you ever thought about building your own fuzz face? They're actually not that technical in terms of circuit. They're inherently hard to get good or to get right because you need a good set of matched transistors, you need to bias them properly, and you need to know how to use it. But you know, after doing a bit of research, I've decided that I'm going to try and have a crack at handwiring one. This is my good links to, I'm definitely doing that. But I do have this. This is a Dunlop Jimi Hendrix BC108 transistor fuzz face. These things actually sound really awesome. I've got a couple of them. I've got another big one like this and a couple of smaller ones because I really do like these. So yeah, I bought this specifically to pull apart. So I'm going to try and hand wire this and then paint it and pretty much make my own boutique pedal. So come along for the journey. Hopefully I don't stuff it up, and yeah, let's go. Okay, so first things first, got to take apart the fuzz face. This is a pretty simple process. Basically, just there's a screw in the back. Get the back plate off. And once that's off, just got to basically take out the jacks. So loosen them off. I like to, once I've unscrewed them, I like to put the washers back into the jacks or onto the jacks and then screw everything back together just so I don't lose anything. And then onto the pots, so take the knobs off. There's usually some little washers on there just to hold the knobs off the top of the fuzz face. And same thing, take the nuts off and then screw the washers and the nuts back onto the pots just so I don't lose them. And with the switch, there's a nut underneath the tread for the fuzz face, so it can be pretty hard to access. Because I'm going to repaint this, I just decided to rip the tread off, and that gave me access to the nut underneath, which let me undo it. But yeah, if you do want to leave the tread on, it can be a bit of a pain to try and get out. So yep, same thing, put the nut back on, then onto the board. As you can see, there's the stock board. Actually, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty vintage looking already. So this is the vintage board that I'm going to be using that I got from Amplified Parts. I think that's just a reproduction of an old Dallas Arbiter style one. Onto taking off the boards, it's just those two screws holding it down. So that came off pretty easy, then you can get everything out. There's the back of the original board. And the other side, looks like a nice neat job. And then onto desoldering the wires from the board. So to start off, I just add a little bit of solder to my soldering iron, just to help the solder flow. And then it's a matter of just heating up each one of the joins and pretty much just pulling each wire out. Now onto populating the vintage board. So basically I'm just figuring out where each resistor goes, bending the legs on it to fit so it just slots into the little holes. I pretty much bend one leg and then line it up to get the distance, and then bend the other leg. And obviously try to get the resistor in the middle of the bends so it looks nice and neat. I'm going to leave, I left the middle resistor out in this thinking it was the position of R2, which goes to the collector pin of the Q2 transistor, but as you'll see ahead, I left the wrong one out, but we'll get to that later. So with the pins on the back of the transistors, they do have a special spot within the board that they need to go. The guy I got it off showed the pin out. which is those letters on the bottom, the C, B, and E for each transistor, and that's collector, base, and emitter pins. And on the vintage board that I got, you can see where the transistors goes. They're labelled E, B, and C. So it's just a matter of figuring out which pin's which, and then putting it in the right spot. And with any transistor, usually you can just Google the part number, and it should show you what the pin out is. So it'll say which pins C, B, and E, which is pretty easy. Then onto the capacitors, electrolytic caps. These ones, they do have a positive and negative, so they need to go around the right way. And it can help to, when you do put them in, just bend the legs a little bit so that when you flip it over to solder it, they do stay in place. So as you can see, I bent most of those legs over just to hold the resistors or the capacitors against the board. So yep, just starting off, soldering each one, adding a little bit of solder to the end of my soldering iron again, and then always putting the solder iron on the back of the wire, and then feeding the solder over into it. So basically, you're not trying to put solder onto the iron. You're essentially trying to heat the component and the board, and then let the solder flow towards the soldering iron. That just creates a better join. Solder each one, trim them off. Just be careful not to put too much heat especially into the transistors, because that can melt the inside of the transistors. What I'm doing here is I'm just putting some pieces of wire in where I'm going to put a trim pot, which acts like a variable resistor, so that you can bias it. But as I said before, I'm actually putting that in the wrong spot. So if you do copy this, don't copy that bit just yet. And that's probably a good warning if you do decide to copy it. Make sure you watch the whole video first. So here's pretty much the finished board of most of the components. There's those two legs that are going to take the trim pot. This is the schematic I was working off. And this is the point where I realized that I've put the two capacitors that have a polarity in the wrong position. So positive and negative need to be turned around. So I desoldered those, flipped them around, soldered them back in. Not too much of an issue. Happy that I figured it out now. Basically, it's something you need to be aware of if you're going to do this, because because the original Fuzzface that I'm using, the Dunlop one, is a silicon Fuzzface and has silicon transistors. That was a NPN transistors, which means the polarity or the current runs positive into the base pins. I'm pretty sure it is. But with the germanium transistors, it's actually a negative current flow. So essentially current flows different ways through each one. So probably the easiest way to describe it is the battery just needs to be turned around, and then anything that has, that will only flow one way, positive to negative, obviously needs to be facing the right way. So I had to flip those capacitors around. So I've got everything, all the components welded in, and then it's a matter of just soldering the old wires back into the right place. Just sticking them through the new holes and soldering them on. And here's a little trim pot that I'm going to solder onto those two legs. So basically, there's 3 legs on the trim pot. You just want to solder the middle leg and one of the outside ones to one end, and then the other outside leg to the other. And then it can act as like a variable resistor. Once again, this is in the wrong spot, so don't copy this bit, but if it is in the right spot, how I've soldered it in would have worked.
So yeah, and at this point, I was feeling pretty good to go test it. So this is after putting everything back into the housing, screwing the pots back in and the switch, and now it's time to test it. Apologies for such a crappy camera angle. This was after I'd been soldering for a couple of hours, and then I really wanted to go and test it. So this is just the bypassed clean tones. The pedal's not actually on here. And now I turn it on. And as you can hear, I got nothing. Yeah, this was a bit demoralising, but at the same time, I kind of wasn't expecting it to go well the first time. Basically, I just wasn't getting any signal out of it. I could tell there was a dodgy solder joint, so if I sort of tapped the battery, it was making popping noises. And yeah, obviously just wasn't getting any volume out of it. So on to the next day. First things first, after a bit of troubleshooting, I noticed that the battery was around the wrong way. So although I'd flipped the capacitors to run in a certain direction, I hadn't actually flipped the polarity of the battery. So that needed to be done. And then because it was the next day and I had a bit more time, I was like, you know what, I'm going to rewire this whole thing because I'm not a fan of the rainbow colored wires. I wanted to do the wires in black and orange. Now, if you're going to do this yourself, I'd recommend using this wiring, this schematic from Amplified Parts. You can get this from their website and it's linked to the page that actually has the boards that I bought. So had I used this at the start, I would have saved myself a lot of issues. Yes, that's just a good diagram showing where each wire goes, especially around the foot switch and the pots and everything. So to rewire it, I cut each wire to the length, or essentially traced each wire, just took each wire off one by one, and then tinned each new wire, trimmed it to size, and welded it into place. I took the switch back out because it was a lot easier to do out of the housing. And yeah, it's just a matter of taking each wire out one by one and just replacing it with, essentially what I'm doing is a different coloured wire. So I think it'll look a bit better in the end. Or you could just take it all out and start again with that original wiring diagram that I just showed you. So as you can see there, that's just tinning the wire. So after doing the rest of the soldering, it was on to just trimming each wire to the right length so it could go into the PCB. So that wasn't too bad, just basically putting it where I want the wires to run and giving myself a little bit of excess. After that, it was to strip the end of each wire, tin it, and then pretty much put it onto the board the same way I had with the pots and the jacks, because I already had some solder on there from when I'd originally wired it back up. So just put the board back in place. The holes of the board were slightly too close together than where the screw holes were in the actual in the housing. So I'm gonna have to drill that out at a later stage, but for now, just that single screw is enough to hold it in. Okay, so bypass works. Okay, so we're getting some sort of signal. Ah, that's not good. So guys, at this point I was pretty demoralised. I put in quite a lot of hours, and yeah, the fact that it wasn't working was a bit of a pain, but at the same time, I kind of expected this process to not run too smoothly. In the end, I realised 3 of the resistors were in the wrong positions. Luckily figured that out, and yeah, went back back to the drawing board, and after replacing all the resistors, this is what I ended up with. Basically, I replaced all the resistors, and I decided to use metal film resistors that have a bit higher tolerance. And yeah, basically put all that back together. Double checked all the solder joins, went over the whole thing. And yeah, finally got it working. This is just the clean tone. I'm gonna turn that on. All right, and with the fuzz. So this is volume and fuzz cranked. So that to me sounds a little bit flat. What I usually do with a lot of my fuzzes is I'll run a drive or a boost after them. So I just find it fattens it up. It also means you can shape the tone a little bit more if you want to. So that's without a boost. That's the boost turned on. Roll the volume back a little bit. That's at about 8.5. So as you can hear, it sounds all right. I like it. Yeah, is it the best fuzz in the world? Obviously not, but I'm pretty happy that I built it, and yeah, I think that makes it makes it more satisfying. So would I recommend doing this? 100%. I have learnt so much about schematics, about fuzzes, about transistors. It's something I really wanted to learn about because I think, as I said, these are my favorite pedals. I love fuzz pedals. It was definitely a bit frustrating at times, like putting it all together, coming back, trying to get to work. First 2 times I didn't get sound. Then I got real intermittent, like it was not a very good fuzz sound, and it was cutting in and out, so I figured there was a dodgy solder joint somewhere. But yeah, anyway, after a fair bit of troubleshooting and a lot of back and forth, when I finally did get it going, I was stoked. It sounds okay. I haven't actually biased the transistors. If I did it again, I'd definitely set it all up on a breadboard first, put in some variable, or make up some variable resistors, and bias it, until it sound good to my ears, and do it that way, rather than trying to solder it all together. And then, the biggest thing was when I was troubleshooting, I didn't know if there was an issue with the transistors, and I didn't want to desolder them and take them out to test them because I didn't want to put more heat through it. So basically I wanted to try everything else that I could, and yeah, luckily it wasn't any issue with the transistors. What's interesting is these germanium transistors are quite unstable. So they're okay. It's nothing crazy, but I just noticed first thing in the morning, tried to get them going, it was a little bit cold, and it doesn't get that cold. I'm in Sunshine Coast in Australia, so it's not like super cold climate, but yeah, I could actually hear them heating up as I was playing. So yeah, that was just another thing to keep in mind with certain germanium transistors, is they can be a little bit finicky. So you might plug them in one day when it's super cold, they might be spitting and farting all over the place, and then they might warm up and become nice and creamy sounding. So yeah. And yeah, if you're thinking about it, grab a kit, or put together a kit like I've done, I guess, of parts. I wanted a big enclosure fuzz, so that's why I did this. And yeah, it's just been a really awesome experience, and I'm kind of happy that I had the troubles I had, because that meant that I did have to go and figure stuff out and figure out why stuff wasn't working. So had I just soldered it all together and it worked, would have been nice, but I just wouldn't have learnt as much as I did. So yeah, definitely give it a crack. Look guys, if you like this video, please like and subscribe, comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on the build. I didn't get a chance to paint it. It's still just a standard Dunlop. I think I'll change, or I'll leave that for another video, maybe part 2, because I want to, the other thing I want to do is clean up all this wiring and make it look a bit nicer. And yeah, just see what I come up with there. I did want to paint it, but I haven't had time, and I want to put the video out. So yeah, let me know what you think down below, and yeah, cheers for watching. Thank you.